Adam Porter stood at the river's edge, his 8-year-old son Thomas beside him, watching their Oregon dreams drown in brown, churning water. The spring melt had transformed what should have been a fordable crossing into half a mile of violent current. Debris rushed past whole trees. Pieces of someone's wagon. Things he didn't want to name. When can we cross? Pa, Thomas asked. Adam had no answer. Their wagon sat 20 yards back. Everything they owned strapped under canvas. The land deed crinkled in his coat pocket when he shifted his weight. 160 acres waiting for them in the Willamette Valley. His wife's brother had the neighboring claim. Family. Martha had called it. A place where Thomas wouldn't grow up alone. He crouched to his son's level. Might be we need to wait a spell. How long? Don't know yet. Upstream. 3 other wagons clustered where travelers had been waiting a week already. A bearded man had told Adam yesterday that the Snake River ran like this for weeks, some years. Adam couldn't wait weeks. His money was nearly gone. They'd stretched supplies thin already, and Thomas had grown out of his only pair of boots. The boy wandered along the bank, throwing stones into the shallows. Adam walked the opposite direction, studying the water. He knew wood and nails, angles and joints. He could build a house that would stand 100 years. But this river moved like something alive and angry, and he knew nothing about taming it. He touched the land deed in his pocket. Martha's final words came back sharp and clear. Get our boy to family. Promise me. Adam, don't let him grow up alone. He'd held her hand while fever took her 6 months back. He'd promised because a man keeps his word to his dying wife. But standing here, watching water, he couldn't cross. He didn't know how to keep that promise. The far shore shimmered in the morning mist, so close, might as well be the moon. That night, after Thomas slept in the wagon, Adam walked the riverbank alone. The roar of water filled everything. Drowning thought. He was a carpenter, not a riverman. He could measure twice and cut once, but he couldn't measure this. The land deed stayed in his pocket. The promise stayed in his chest. The river kept running, indifferent to both. The second wagon creaked to a halt beside Adam's just after dawn. A woman climbed down, practical dress dusty from the trail. Dark hair pulled back severe. She was maybe 35. Lean and sun-worn. A girl of about 10 followed her, quieter, watching everything with serious eyes. The woman walked straight to the river's edge. She stood there a long time, eyes tracing the current's patterns, following the debris flow, studying the width. Then she walked upstream 50 yards, studying more, downstream the same. When she returned, she looked at Adam directly. You planning to wait it out? Don't know how long that might take. Adam admitted. She nodded. Watch. Could be days. Could be weeks. She paused, still studying the water. Or we could cross together, build a raft big enough for both families. Adam blinked. I don't know how to build a raft. I watched it done twice on the trail from Missouri. Once at the Platte, once at the Snake River. That she turned to face him fully. But I need strong arms and a man's weight for the testing. Behind them, Thomas had emerged from the wagon. The girl smiled tentatively at him. Within minutes they were talking. Children making instant alliance the way only children could. The woman extended her hand. Grace Winslow. My husband would have known how to build it, since he's gone. I've got the knowledge. You've got the strength. She paused. Seems like Providence put us here together. Adam shook her hand. Her grip was firm. calloused. A working woman's hand. Adam Porter. This here's Thomas. My daughter Sarah. Your husband. Cholera. 3 weeks into the trail. Grace's voice stayed steady. Turning back meant admitting I couldn't finish what we started, so I kept driving the wagon. Adam understood that kind of determination. My wife Martha died 6 months back. Fever. Made me promise to get Thomas to family in Oregon. Grace looked at the river again, then back at Adam. So we both got promises to keep. Reckon we do. Then we'd best get started. Ashapo. She pulled a stick from her pack. I'll draw what I remember. You tell me if your hands can build it. Ni. Adam watched her sketch in the dirt, log lengths, rope patterns, crossbeam placement. She drew with precision, explaining as she went. He recognized good design when he saw it, even if the medium was water instead of wood. You really think we can cross on this? I think we can try together. Grace looked up from her drawing. You good at accepting help? Mr. Porter, not particularly. Neither am I. She almost smiled. Aggie, good thing we're not helping each other. We're building something neither of us can build alone. Adam studied the design again. It could work. Maybe, if they built it right. If the river cooperated. If 100 things went their way. He extended his hand again. Partners. Then, Grace shook. Partners. We start cutting timber at dawn. They pulled their rope and tools that evening. Grace's drawings covered the ground between their wagon's log dimensions, lashing patterns, weight distribution calculations she'd memorized watching other crossings. Et comme ouvre si dien senta. Adam studied them with a carpenter's eye. The cottonwoods upstream, Grace said, pointing. They float better than pine, and the current's slower there for working. How do you know cottonwood floats better? Watched a man test both at the Platte. The pine raft sank 3 inches lower. She tapped the drawing. 3 inches matters when you're carrying wagons. Adam nodded slowly. She'd been paying attention while other folks just looked. There was intelligence in that, practical wisdom that couldn't be taught. I can cut what you need. Done timber work before? I figured. Your hands know tools. He glanced at his calloused palms. Surprised she'd noticed. Martha used to tease him about his carpenter's hands. Always nicked and rough. The memory came gentle instead of sharp. Maybe time was doing its work after all. Why Oregon? He asked. Grace gathered her drawings. My husband wanted land of his own. Not tenant farming. Not working another man's property. He dreamed big. She paused. When he died, I thought about turning back. But the dream didn't die with him. Seemed wrong to let it. Martha's brother has a claim in the Willamette. Good soil. He wrote, room enough for us nearby. Adam watched Thomas and Sarah examining something by the wagon wheel a beetle. Maybe. Or an interesting stone. She made me promise Thomas wouldn't grow up alone. That he'd have family. You're a good father for keeping that promise. I don't know about good. I'm fumbling most days. The admission came easier than expected. Keep wondering what she would have done different. Grace looked at him with understanding that needed no words. Then she rolled up her drawings. Tomorrow we start building. Daylight to dusk. It'll take 2 days minimum. Maybe 3. And then Then we trust our work and cross. She met his eyes. You afraid me terrified? Good. Me too. Grace almost smiled again. Means we'll be careful. That night, Adam lay awake in the wagon listening to Thomas breathe. The boy slept sound, trusting his father to make things right. That trust felt heavier than any timber Adam would cut tomorrow. He thought about Grace Winslow, a widow driving her own wagon west, carrying her dead husband's dream forward because giving up meant letting death win. There was steel in that woman and something else. Hope. Maybe the kind that doesn't quit even when quit makes sense. The river roared its constant song. Adam closed his eyes and saw Grace's drawings. The raft taking shape in his mind. Cottonwood logs. Rope lashed just so. Two families trusting wooden knots in each other. Tomorrow they'd start. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finish what both their spouses couldn't. Dawn arrived cold and clear. Adam and Grace walked upstream together, axes over shoulders, while Thomas and Sarah stayed by the wagons with strict instructions about staying away from the water. In mine haunt, the cottonwoods grew thick along the slower current. Grace pointed to specific trees, explaining why diameter, height, how they'd float when stripped. Adam set to work with his axe, and the first tree fell clean after 20 minutes of steady chopping. Good cut, Grace observed. Straight and true. Carpentry, Adam said, catching his breath. You learn to read the grain. They worked through the morning. Adam felled. Grace trimmed branches and measured. His carpenter's precision served them well, each log cut to exact length, bark stripped smooth. Grace had an eye for quality. Rejecting 2 logs, Adam thought fine. This one's got rot inside, she said, pointing to barely visible discoloration. Won't hold weight. He looked closer. She was right. How'd you spot that? My husband taught me to see wood like he saw it. Said a farmer's wife ought to know good timber from bad. By noon, they had 8 logs down and stripped. The children appeared with cornbread and water. Thomas reported they'd been collecting kindling and staying safe. Sarah had drawn the river in the dirt, measuring it with sticks. Grace smiled at that, recognizing her daughter's practical mind. After eating, the real work began. Lashing the logs together required both of them. Grace called the pattern while Adam tied the knots, his carpenter's hands strong and certain. When he started to place a cross beam his own way, Grace stopped him. Needs to be 18 inches from that one, not 24. Why? Weight distribution. The wagons sit different than you'd think on water. Adam wanted to argue his instinct said 24, but he stopped himself. She'd watched this done. He hadn't. Pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. 18 inches. He agreed, and adjusted. Grace's expression didn't change, but something eased in her shoulders. They worked the rest of the afternoon in steady rhythm, her knowledge directing his execution. The language between them became wordless. She'd point. He'd understand. She'd adjust a measurement. He'd nod and correct. By evening, the raft's frame lay on the bank, not finished, but real, substantial. Thomas and Sarah examined it with wide eyes. It's big as a barn. Thomas breathed. Needs to be. Grace said, carrying 2 wagons and all of us. Adam studied their day's work. Wood chips covered the ground like snow. His shoulders ached pleasantly. The burn of honest labor. Grace examined the joints, testing each lashing. Your hand's no good work, she said quietly. The compliment landed different than most. It came from someone who understood what good work meant. what it cost, why it mattered. Adam felt something unfamiliar pride that didn't feel like bragging, just acknowledgement between people who both knew the weight of doing things right. Mal by it fun. We'll finish tomorrow. Grace continued. Final lashings. Test the balance. Adjust if needed. Then the water test. Then we find out if I remembered right. They walked back to the wagons together. The children ran ahead, already talking about the crossing like it was adventure instead of danger. Adam glanced at Grace. Her face showed fatigue but determination. Thank you, he said, for knowing what I don't. Grace looked at him. Thank you for trusting that I do. The second day's work finished at dusk. The raft sat complete at the water's edge, 18 feet long and 12 wide. Every rope had been checked twice, every knot tested. They'd added extra crossbeams where Grace remembered seeing them on the Snake River crossing. Walked to Saint-Marc March. Now 2 separate campfires burned between the wagons. Adam sat by his, watching Thomas sleep. Across the way, Grace moved around her fire. Checking supplies, she glanced toward Adam. Started to say something about the rope tension. Then walked over. Mind if I ask about the knots on the left side? They ended up at 1 fire instead of 2, discussing technique. Then lashing patterns. Then stopping talking about rafts altogether. How long were you married? Grace asked. 12 years. Met Martha at a barn raising. She brought pie. Adam smiled at the memory. Worst pie I ever ate. But I told her it was good because she had kind eyes. Did you ever tell her the truth? On our 10th anniversary. She laughed so hard she cried. He poked the fire with a stick. She got better at pie. Never did get great, but I didn't marry her for pie. Grace smiled. John and I had 15 years. Met in church. He was the only man who didn't treat me like I was fragile. She stared into the flames. When the cholera took him. I wanted to die too. For about a week. I genuinely wanted to follow him. What changed me? Sarah needed breakfast, needed her dress mended, needed a mother who could function. Grace's voice stayed level. So I learned to function. Then I learned to drive the wagon. Then I discovered I was stronger than I knew. Adam understood that progression. The first morning after Martha died. He'd stayed in bed until Thomas asked for food. Then you got up because someone needed you. Then you kept getting up until one day you realized you were still alive. I'm terrified of that river. Grace admitted suddenly. Watching it done isn't the same as doing it. Then we'll be terrified together. Adam said, but we'll do it anyway. She looked at him. Something shifting in her expression. Recognition, maybe. 2 people who'd lost their first choice but kept walking anyway, kept trying, kept getting up when staying down made more sense. You're a good man. Adam Porter. Just stubborn. Same thing. Sometimes. They sat quiet after that. Not awkward silence, but comfortable kind. 2 people who didn't need words to fill space. Above them, stars scattered across clear sky. The river's roar continued its endless song, but sitting here by the shared fire, it sounded less threatening. Still dangerous, still something to respect, but not quite as impossible as before. Sarah called out in her sleep. Some dream sound. Grace rose to check on her. Returned to report all was well. Thomas hadn't stirred. Good sleeper. That boy. Martha used to say he slept like his father, deep and trusting. I keep wondering what Martha would have done different. Adam said, with Thomas, with the journey, with everything. She'd probably wonder the same about your choices. Grace said gently, and that's what we do when they're gone. Question ourselves, because they can't tell us we're doing fine. Am I doing fine? Grace looked at him steady. You're here. You're trying. You haven't given up. She paused. That's more than fine. That's everything. The fire burned low. They should sleep. Tomorrow meant the water test. The moment they'd discover if Grace's memory and Adam's hands had built something trustworthy. But neither moved to leave. The fire felt good. The company felt better. After 6 months of doing everything alone, Adam had forgotten what it meant to share a burden with someone who understood the weight. Good night, Grace. Good night, Adam. She returned to her wagon. He banked his fire. Above, the stars wheeled on, indifferent and eternal. Below, 2 families camped beside an impassable river, sleeping before they'd try the impossible. They loaded rocks onto the raft mid-morning, simulating the weight of both wagons. Adam and Grace had calculated carefully, placing stones where the wagon wheels would sit. Thomas and Sarah helped carry smaller rocks, treating it like a game. That should do it, Grace said finally. About the same weight as we'll cross with. They pushed the raft into the shallows together, working it toward calmer water at the river's edge. The current grabbed it immediately. Even in the slow water, the raft bucked once, settled, then started listing to the left. Adam felt his stomach drop. It's tilting. I see it. Grace waded deeper, trying to study the underside. The balance is wrong. They pulled it back to shore quickly. Before the list grew worse, on dry ground again, the problem became obvious. The weight distribution was off. The raft would hold, but it wouldn't hold level. If they loaded the wagons this way, everything would shift, slide, potentially spill into the current. Adam stared at their work. 2 days of labor, and it wasn't right. You said you knew how, he started, frustration bleeding through. Grace's eyes flashed. I said I watched it done. There's a difference. A difference that could kill our children. The words hung between them, sharp and true. Sarah and Thomas had gone quiet, sensing the tension. Grace circled the raft slowly, examining every joint. Her face showed exhaustion, and something worse, doubt. The confidence she'd carried for 2 days cracked, showing the fear underneath. I'm sorry, she said finally. The memory was clear, but I must have missed something. Adam wanted to stay angry. Anger felt safer than fear. But watching Grace study the raft with desperate concentration, he saw himself reflected, both of them trying so hard, carrying dead spouses' dreams, terrified of failing the children who trusted them. His anger dissolved into something more honest, fear, plain. Simple fear that they'd come this far just to fail. Grace knelt beside the raft, running her hands over the crossbeams. The Snake River raft had 2 more crossbeams here and here. She pointed. I forgot. I'm so sorry. Then we add the crossbeams. Adam heard his voice come out steadier than he felt. We're not giving up. We've used 2 days. Then we use a 3rd, or a 4th. He crouched beside her. Grace, look at me. As she did, eyes bright with unshed tears. We fix it, Adam said. We're not the first people to get something wrong the first time. We fix it. Test it again. And if it's still wrong, we fix it again until it's right. You're not angry. I'm terrified, but I'm not angry. He gestured at the raft. You got us this far. Your knowledge built this. We just need to build it better. Grace nodded slowly. The fear didn't leave her face, but determination crept back in. 2 more crossbeams, and I think the rope pattern needs adjustment on the right side. Show me. They worked through the afternoon, Adam cutting new crossbeams to Grace's specifications, adjusting the lashing pattern she'd refined through sleepless worry. The children stayed close, quieter than before, understanding something important was happening. By evening, the raft sat modified, different, hopefully better. We test it tomorrow, Grace said. Fresh eyes, fresh start. Adam agreed. They were both too exhausted to see clearly now. That night, separate fires again, but before sleeping, Grace appeared at Adam's wagon. Thank you, she said quietly, for not giving up on this, on me. We're partners, Adam replied. Partners don't quit on each other. She nodded and left. Adam lay awake long after, listening to the river, thinking about trust and fear and the thin line between knowledge and certainty. Grace had been honest. She'd watched, not built. She was doing her best with partial information, same as him. Really. Same as everyone fumbling through life without the instruction manual. Tomorrow they'd test the raft again. And if it failed again, they'd fix it again. Because quitting meant letting the river win. Quitting meant breaking promises to the dead. And neither of them were quitters. Adam woke before dawn, unable to sleep. He'd spent the night imagining disaster, the raft tilting, wagons sliding, children screaming. Every version ended in the river swallowing everything. Across the camp, Grace's wagon showed lamplight. She was awake too, probably fighting the same nightmares. He lay there thinking about Martha's promise. Get our boy to family. Simple words, impossible weight. He'd thought the hard part was leaving Missouri, saying goodbye to the life they'd built. Now he knew the hard part was every day after. Every decision made alone. Every moment wondering if he was doing right by Thomas. Al contraste. Was he trusting a widow's memory to cross a killer river seemed like the opposite of right. But what choice did they have? Wait here until money ran out. Go back defeated. Morning arrived. Gray. And cold. Grace emerged from her wagon with paper's new drawings, refined through a sleepless night. I've thought it through again, she said, laying them out. Here's what we missed. She'd mapped every detail she could remember, filling gaps with engineering logic. The crossbeam placement, the rope tension, even the order they'd load the wagon's heavy items low and center. Adam studied her work. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. You were up all night. Couldn't risk more mistakes. She met his eyes. I keep seeing my husband's face. He was so confident about everything. All I have is watching and guessing. Your guessing got us this far. What if it's not enough? The question came out raw. What if I'm leading your family to disaster alongside mine? Adam looked at Thomas, still sleeping in the wagon, then at Sarah, emerging from Grace's wagon with worried eyes. 2 children trusting adults who were just as scared as they were. You sure about these changes? he asked Grace. No, the honesty hurt them both. But I'm sure we can't wait here forever. I'm sure trying together is better than failing alone. Adam nodded slowly. Then we build it right this time. They worked through the morning with doubled care. Every crossbeam measured twice, every knot tested 3 times. Grace checked and rechecked her drawings. Adam verified each measurement against her specifications. Thomas and Sarah helped where they could, carrying rope, holding logs steady. The children's trust felt like prayer, innocent faith that parents knew what they were doing. By noon, the modifications were complete. They tested smaller sections first, adjusting rope tension, watching how the wood responded to stress. Grace waded into shallows, examining the underside from every angle. The balance looks better, she said. They loaded rocks again. Same weight as before. Pushed the raft into calm water. This time it sat level, steady, riding the gentle current without list or wobble. It's holding. Adam breathed. Grace circled it. Checking. Always checking. Finally, she nodded. It's good. Or as good as we can make it. They pulled the raft back to shore and stood looking at it. Tomorrow morning, they'd load the wagons for real. They'd push into the current for real. They'd trust this construction with everything they owned and everyone they loved. I'm still terrified, Grace admitted. Me too. But we're doing it anyway. We are. I did that evening. They gathered the children and explained what tomorrow would bring. The danger. Yes. But also the plan. How they'd cross together. How everyone had a job. How being scared was fine as long as you were also brave. Thomas asked. What if the raft breaks? Adam wanted to promise it wouldn't. Wanted to lie and say everything would be fine. But Thomas deserved truth. Then we hold on to each other, he said, and we don't let go. Sarah took her mother's hand. Thomas took his father's. The 4 of them stood looking at the raft as evening light turned the river from brown to gold. Ori Hansdaye. The river's pretty when it's not so angry, Sarah observed. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. Most dangerous things are pretty if you look right. They ate together that night, 1 meal instead of 2. Grace had salt pork. Adam had beans. Combined. They made something better than either had alone. The children giggled about something, tension easing into ordinary evening, after the children slept. Adam and Grace sat by the fire one last time. Thank you, Grace said, for believing in this. In me. Thank you for knowing what to do. I'm still guessing. Then you're the best guesser I ever met. Adam smiled. Tomorrow we cross Gagam together. Grace nodded. Together. The fire burned low. The river sang its endless song. Above them. Stars marked the same paths they'd marked for 1,000 years. Below, 2 families prepared to trust wood and rope and each other across water that didn't care if they succeeded. But they cared. And sometimes, that was enough. Dawn broke clear and cold. They loaded Adam's wagon first, Grace directing every placement with mathematical precision. Heavy trunks low and center, lighter goods distributed evenly. Adam lashed everything down with rope, triple checking each knot. Grace's wagon went on second. Same careful arrangement. They worked in silence. Concentration absolute. One mistake here could mean disaster halfway across. The children boarded last. Adam tied safety ropes around their waists, long enough for movement but secure to the wagon frames, if anyone went overboard. The rope would hold them. You stay inside the wagon bed, he told Thomas. No matter what happens, you hold on to the sides and stay put. Yes, Pa. Sarah received the same instruction from her mother. Both children looked small and fragile, with rope around their middles. Grace's hands shook as she tied the final knot. Adam touched her shoulder. We can do this. We have to do this. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the raft. Adam took the right with a long pole. Grace took the left with another, on Adam's count. They pushed off from the shore. The current grabbed them immediately. The raft bucked as water hit its underside, the force massive and immediate. Adam planted his pole, pushing hard to keep the mangled right. Grace matched him from the other side, their movement synchronized through desperate necessity. We're holding, Grace called, for the first 100 feet. They made steady progress. The raft rode level. The modifications working. Adam's arms burned from poling against current, but they were moving toward the far shore at an angle, fighting the river's pull downstream. Then they hit the main channel. The current seized the raft like a living thing, spinning them 15 degrees off course. Water surged over the front edge, soaking the wagon wheels. Thomas cried out. Sarah gripped the wagon side, knuckles white. Left side, Grace shouted. Hard left. Adam threw his weight, pulling with everything he had. The raft swung back, overcorrecting. Grace compensated from her side. For 30 seconds they had no control at all. Just reaction. The river deciding their fate while they fought for any influence over direction. We're going downstream. Adam yelled, I know, keep angling. They were halfway across now, the current pulling them steadily south. The far shore sat within reach, but sliding past fast. If they missed the landing point, the next calm water was a mile downstream, and they'd never pull back up against this current. Adam's arms screamed. Sweat poured despite the cold spray. He looked across the raft and saw Grace straining just as hard, face set with determination, refusing to quit. Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them now. Together. Push. They drove their poles in unison, angling the raft sharply toward shore. The current fought them. But the raft responded slowly, impossibly slowly. They closed the gap. 50 feet, 40, 30. A submerged log hit the underside with a boom that shook everything. The raft lurched. Adam's pole slipped. For one terrible moment he thought they'd spin out of control. But the lashings held. The crossbeams held. Grace's memory and Adam's hands had built something strong enough. 20 feet. 10. The front edge of the raft scraped bottom, then caught, then held against the current's pull. We're grounded, Adam shouted. They pulled it further onto the shallows, working it up onto the bank until the whole raft sat on Oregon soil. For a long moment, no one moved. The river rushed past, indifferent to their success. They'd crossed its killing current and lived. Then Thomas whooped. Pure joy in the sound. Sarah laughed, high and relieved. The spell broke. Adam and Grace looked at each other across the raft, exhausted, soaked, grinning like fools. We did it. Adam breathed. Grace nodded, too overwhelmed for words. Then she corrected, we did, 3 days later. They'd found their land. Adam's claim sat in a meadow with timber access and a creek running clear through good soil. Grace's bordered his to the west, equally blessed with water and trees. Standing on the boundary between their properties, Adam could see both futures, her cabin rising here. his there. Close enough to share resources, but separate enough for dignity. Grace pointed to a slight rise. I'll build there. Morning sun, afternoon shade. Good spot. Adam studied the sight lines. You'll be able to see my place from your porch. That might come in handy. They'd spent the morning marking her claim stakes. Adam drove the final post into the ground, feeling something shift in his chest. Not the sharp pain of grief that had lived there for months, but something looser, room to breathe. Space for something new. Martha would have liked you, he said quietly. Grace smiled. I think I would have liked her too. They walked back toward the wagons where Thomas and Sarah had spent the last hour planning their fort. The children had decided the big oak between properties would be perfect, already arguing companionably about whether it needed a rope ladder or wooden steps. Seems like the children have decided we're a unit, Grace observed. Adam watched his son laughing with Sarah. Easy and natural. Thomas hadn't laughed like that since before Martha died. Something tight in Adam's chest eased further. Children see things clearly sometimes, he said. Maybe we should listen. Grace looked at him. What are you saying? Adam Porter. I'm saying we crossed a river. Neither of us could cross alone. He met her eyes. I'm saying your knowledge and my hands built something that held us both. I'm saying those children are already family, and maybe we should be honest about what we're building here. And what are we building? Whatever comes next, together. He paused. If you're willing, Sekur Nidemin. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she took his hand, rough carpenter's palm, meeting rough widow's palm. I'm willing, she said, no, but slowly, with honesty. No pretending we're not still scared. I'm terrified, Adam admitted. Good. Me too. Grace squeezed his hand. That just means it matters. Evening came soft and golden. They sat on the boundary between their lands, watching the children play. In the distance, the river that had nearly killed them flowed peacefully toward the ocean. Spring flood, receding to summer calm. The river's beautiful from here, Grace said. It is. Adam thought about the crossing. The terror and trust combined. Strange to be grateful for something that scared us so badly. Not strange. That river brought us together. Thomas called out, asking if they could start cutting fort timber tomorrow. Sarah added that they'd need rope for the ladder. Yawasakakag. The children's plans sprawled into next week, next month, assuming parents would stay close and available. Adam realized they were right. He and Grace had crossed more than water. They'd crossed from grief into possibility, from isolation into partnership, from I can't into we will. I should start on your cabin foundation next week, he said, before the ground gets too hard. I can help, Grace offered. I'm decent with a saw. I know you are. They sat watching the evening deepen, shoulders nearly touching, comfortable in silence. Two families becoming one through the simple act of building what neither could build alone. The river had been their test. This land would be their reward. And whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd crossed the water, together. The far shore had become home. The promised land wasn't just the acres they'd claimed, but the trust they'd built crossing to reach it. Life's deepest rivers couldn't be crossed alone, but with the right partner, with knowledge meeting strength, with honesty and determination. Even the impossible became the path forward. Thomas's laughter echoed across the meadow. Sarah's answering giggle followed. Grace's hand found Adam's again, and he held it. Tomorrow they'd start building. Tonight, they'd rest on solid ground, grateful for the journey that had nearly drowned them. but instead delivered them here. Home.